The twin moons hung low in the dusty sky, their pale light spilling over the crooked stalls of the alien marketplace. The air was hot and heavy, filled with the smell of sweat, smoke, and fear. Crowds of different species moved like a restless tide, shouting, laughing, bargaining over the price of lives. At the center stood the stage, a raised wooden platform where slaves were displayed. 2 young alien girls knelt there, their thin wrists bound with rough iron cuffs. They were the last of their kind. Everyone in the market knew it. Their people had been hunted, captured, and sold across the stars, until only these 2 remained. One was taller, with long hair tangled over her face, hiding her eyes. The other was smaller, her short hair messy, but her eyes sharp and unafraid. They had been here for hours. The auctioneer, a fat alien with pale skin and yellow teeth, shouted their descriptions to the crowd. Strong enough to work, he barked, but not too clever. So they won't cause trouble. Laughter exploded around the stage. Some called them cursed, others said they were useless. The taller girl flinched at every cruel word, her shoulders trembling. The smaller one kept staring straight ahead, her chin high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The auctioneer tried again, lowering the price each time. 2 for the cost of 1, he shouted. 2 for the price of scraps. Still, no one came forward. They weren't worth the trouble, the crowd thought. That was when a shadow moved. At the edge of the market, a human man stepped into view. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat covered in the dust of many worlds. His face was calm, but his eyes scanned the market like a soldier checking a battlefield. Humans were rare here, and every head turned to watch him. The auctioneer's voice brightened instantly. "Ah, a traveler from far away," he said, smiling like a predator. "Perhaps you are looking for company." The human didn't answer. He walked slowly toward the stage, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. The girls watched him carefully, the taller one with fear, the smaller one with something sharper curiosity. When he stopped in front of them, the crowd leaned closer. "Strange taste for a human," someone muttered. "Maybe he likes broken things," another sneered. The human reached inside his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. It jingled with the sound of coins. "I'll take them," he said quietly. The auctioneer blinked, surprised. "Both?" he asked, almost laughing. "You don't even want to check if they can work?" "I said I'll take them," the man repeated, his voice even but final. The crowd broke into laughter again. Some pointed, some shook their heads, but the human didn't look at them. He placed the coins in the auctioneer's hand and took the key to the cuffs. The iron locks clicked open. The taller girl rubbed her sore wrists, still trembling. The smaller one didn't move, except to look straight into the man's face. "Why?" she asked, her voice low but steady. The human's eyes met hers. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Because I can." He turned and started walking away. The girls hesitated, exchanging a quick glance. Then they followed him. There, bare feet silent on the dirt road. Behind them, the market erupted in jeers and mocking calls. "They won't last a week." Someone shouted, "Hope you like trouble, human." Another laughed, but none of them noticed the way his coat shifted as he walked. None of them saw the black metal handle of a weapon hidden at his side. The streets outside the market were quieter, lined with shuttered shops and the glow of distant lanterns. The taller girl finally found her voice. "You could have left us there," she whispered. "Why didn't you?" The man glanced over his shoulder. "No one should be laughed at for surviving," he said. Something in those words made the smaller girl's eyes soften. For the first time since the morning, her lips almost curved into a smile. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know where he was taking them. But one thing was certain, their lives had just changed forever. Asterisk, the road beyond the market was narrow and quiet, lit only by the pale glow of the twin moons. The human walked in front, his long coat swaying with each step. The 2 alien girls followed close behind, still unsure if this was freedom or just another kind of cage. The taller one kept glancing at the alleys, as if expecting someone to drag them back. The smaller one stayed focused on the human's back, studying every movement he made. His steps were steady, almost too steady, like a man who had walked through danger before. Finally, the taller girl whispered, "Where are you taking us?" The human didn't slow down. "Out of here," he said simply. "That's not an answer." The smaller girl replied sharply. The human glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "Answers come later," he said. "First, we walk." They left the last houses of the town behind and entered open land. Tall grass swayed in the night breeze, carrying the scent of distant rain. In the far distance, mountains rose like dark teeth against the stars. The human led them along a dirt path, avoiding the main road. After a while, he stopped near a small stream. "Rest," he said, lowering the heavy pack from his shoulder. The girls sat by the water, their bodies sore from standing all day on the auction stage. The human crouched nearby, filling a small metal cup from the stream and taking a slow drink. Then he handed the cup to the taller girl. She hesitated, looking at him as if expecting a trick. "It's just water," he said. She drank carefully, passing it to the smaller girl, who gulped it down without hesitation. The human watched them for a moment before asking, "What are your names?" The taller one lowered her gaze. "Sira," she murmured. The smaller one met his eyes. "Leary," she said, her voice firm. He nodded. "I'm Kale." For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were the water and the wind. Then Leary broke the silence. "You bought us," she said, "but not like the others. You don't act like them." Kale looked at her, his gaze steady. "I don't buy people," he said quietly. "I free them." Sira's eyes widened. "Free us? To do what?" "To choose," Kale said, "something they never let you do." The words were strange to them. Choice was something they had never been given. Leary's voice was skeptical. "And if we choose to leave?" Kale shrugged. "Then you leave." He looked toward the distant hills, his jaw tight. "But you won't survive the night out here alone," he added. "Too many things hunt in the dark." They ate a small meal from Kale's pack, meat and bread. It wasn't much, but it was better than the scraps the market had given them. Afterward, Kale built a small fire, shielding its light with a makeshift wall of rocks. Sira sat close to the warmth, but Leary stayed farther back. Watching Kale closely, he moved with quiet efficiency, every action measured. Leary noticed the way his hand rested near the weapon hidden under his coat, even when he was cooking. She also noticed the faint scars along his knuckles and the side of his neck. This was not a man who lived a quiet life. When the fire was steady, Kale spoke again. "There will be people looking for you," he said. "Maybe even by morning." Sira's face went pale. "They'll drag us back," she whispered. "Not if I'm still breathing," Kale said, his tone calm but absolute. Leary tilted her head. "Why?" "You don't even know us." Kale stared into the fire for a long moment. "I've seen enough chains in my life," he said finally. "Don't need to see more." The night grew colder. Kale gave them each a thin blanket from his pack, then sat with his back to a tree, keeping watch. Sarah drifted to sleep quickly, exhaustion pulling her under. Leary, however, stayed awake, her eyes half closed, but her mind sharp. She listened to the quiet sounds of the night wind in the grass, the murmur of the stream, and the steady breathing of the human who had changed their fate in a single moment. She wanted to ask him more, who he really was, why he was here, but for now, she kept silent. Somehow, she knew the answers would come, and when they did, everything might change again, far away, in the darkness beyond the hills. Something howled. Kale's eyes opened instantly. His hand went to his weapon. He didn't move otherwise, but his entire body was alert. Leary noticed. She didn't know what hunted in these lands, but she understood one thing, whatever it was, Kale had faced worse, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safer with someone than she did alone. The howl came again, this time closer, rolling over the hills like a warning. Sira woke with a gasp. clutching the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Cale didn't tell her to be quiet, he simply held a hand up for silence. The night air seemed heavier now, the wind carrying the faint sound of movement in the tall grass. Leary sat up, her eyes scanning the darkness. "What is it?" she whispered. Cale's voice was calm, but low. "Hunters," he said. "4 legs, fast, smart enough to circle prey." The girls exchanged a glance. Syrah's face went pale. Cale rose slowly to his feet, his coat shifting to reveal the black metal of a short rifle slung across his back. Without looking at them, he said, "Stay by the fire, keep it small, and no matter what happens, don't run." Leary frowned. "Why not?" "They chase what runs," Cale answered, already stepping into the shadows. The grass whispered around him as he moved, his boots silent against the damp soil. He stopped a short distance from the camp, scanning the darkness. Syrah hugged her, knees to her chest. Leary clenched her jaw, forcing herself not to follow. Minutes passed like hours. Then, faintly, the sound of a low growl came from the left. Another answered from the right. Cale shifted his stance, rifle raised. The first pair of glowing eyes appeared in the dark, a predator with a long snout, fur bristling, and claws that dug into the earth. It took a step forward, teeth bared. A second appeared to the side, then a third, moving to flank him. Cale didn't back away. Instead, he called out over his shoulder, "Syrah, Lyric, cover your ears." They obeyed instantly. The crack of the rifle tore through the night. One predator dropped instantly, the others scattering into the grass. But the fight wasn't over. Cale stepped back toward the camp, scanning every shadow. "You'll see more before sunrise," he said, reloading with practiced ease. Syrah's voice shook. "Will they come for us?" Cale gave a short nod. "If they're hungry enough." The rest of the night passed without sleep. Cale sat against the same tree, rifle resting across his knees, eyes always moving. Syrah dozed off now and then, but Leary stayed awake. She kept stealing glances at Cale. There was no fear in him, only patience, as if he had lived this moment 100 times before. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the danger faded. The hunters were gone, leaving only paw prints in the dirt and the smell of wild fur in the air. Cale stood and stamped out the last of the fire. "Time to move," he said. The girls followed him onto the narrow path again. The morning was quiet, but their steps felt heavier than before. Syrah spoke first, her voice small. "You could have left us in the market. Instead, you risked your life. Cale didn't." "Look at her. I've seen worse things than hungry animals," he said, "and worse things than chains." Leary tilted her head. "Chains?" Cale's jaw tightened, but he didn't explain. By midday, they reached the edge of a rocky valley. A small settlement was visible far below scattered huts and smoke from cooking fires. Cale stopped, studying the place for a long time. Finally, he turned to them. "You stay behind me, no matter what happens," he said. Syrah frowned. "Why? Are they dangerous?" Cale gave a humorless smile. "Everyone's dangerous when they think they can take something from you." The path down was steep, the rocks loose underfoot. When they reached the valley floor, the settlement's people had already noticed them. A group of rough-looking men and women stepped forward, their eyes lingering on the girls. One of them, a tall man with scars across his arms, smiled without warmth. "Long way from home, stranger," he said to Cale. "New friends, you've found?" Cale's voice was polite, but cold. "Not for sale." The scarred man chuckled. "Everything's for sale." Leary stepped closer to Cale. Syrah's hand trembled as she clutched her blanket tighter. Cale shifted his weight slightly, just enough for his coat to fall open, revealing the rifle at his side. His voice didn't rise, but it carried a sharp edge. "They're with me," he said, "and I'm not in the mood for trades." For a moment, the air felt heavy. The scarred man's smile faded, replaced by a calculating look. Finally, he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Suit yourself, traveler," he said, stepping aside. Cale walked forward, the girls close behind. When they were out of earshot, Cyril whispered, "They would have taken us." Cale nodded once. "That's why you stay close." Leary looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You've done this before. Protecting people like us." Cale's eyes stayed forward. "I've failed before," he said. "That's why I don't fail now." The words lingered in Leary's mind as they left the settlement behind. She didn't know what Cale had lost in the past, but she knew one thing: he was willing to face any danger to make sure it didn't happen again. The path curved away from the settlement and led into the low hills. By late afternoon, the air had grown cooler, and the sound of rushing water drifted toward them. Cale stopped at the crest of a slope, scanning the land ahead. Below lay a wide river, its surface dark and fast, the current pulling hard toward the jagged rocks downstream. A narrow wooden bridge stretched across it, old and weathered, its planks creaking in the wind. Sarah stared at it, her hands tightening on the blanket she still carried. "Is it safe?" she asked softly. Cale didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched and examined the prints in the dirt near the path, fresh tracksuit boots. At least 3 pairs. Heading toward the bridge, he straightened, his jaw tightening. "Maybe safe for crossing," he said, "not safe for stopping." They descended toward the bridge, the noise of the water growing louder with each step. Halfway down, Leary froze. She had seen movement, just a shadow on the far bank. Cale noticed her pause, his voice low. "You saw them too?" Leary nodded. "Bandits?" she asked. "Worse," Cale replied. "Desperate men." When they reached the start of the bridge, a voice called out from the far side. Well, now, a human and 2 little prizes. 3 figures stepped into view, blocking the path. They were rough-looking men in mismatched armor, each carrying a blade or club. One had a jagged scar running from his forehead to his cheek, his smile sharp as a knife. "Leave the girls," the scarred man said. "You can pass." Cale stepped onto the bridge, his boots making the wood groan. The men shifted uneasily, but their leader didn't move aside. "I'm keeping them," Cale said simply. The leader laughed. "That's not how this works." Behind Cale, Sarah gripped Leary's arm. Leary's eyes darted to the water below. They ran. The river would take them. Cale's coat shifted slightly, his hand resting near the grip of his pistol. "Move," he said, his tone flat. The scarred man's grin faded. "You think you can take us all before we got you?" he growled. Cale didn't answer. Instead, his eyes flicked briefly to the left, then back to the man. A low thud sounded behind the bandits, something dropping into the dirt. They turned instinctively, and in that moment, Cale drew his weapon. The sound of the shot cracked across the river, echoing in the hills. The leader fell to his knees, his blade clattering to the planks. The other 2 backed away quickly, hands raised. Cale stepped forward, the pistol steady in his grip. "Drop your weapons," he ordered. They obeyed, tossing them into the river. Then Cale gestured with the barrel. "Run." They didn't wait to be told twice, disappearing into the trees. Sarah stared wide-eyed as Cale reloaded calmly. You didn't even look scared," she said. Cale glanced at her. "Fear's useful, but only if it doesn't freeze you." They crossed the rest of the bridge quickly, the wood creaking under their weight. Once on the far side, Cale led them off the path and into a stand of trees. They walked until the sound of the river faded behind them. Only then did he stop, crouching to check the ground for tracks again. Satisfied they weren't being followed, he motioned for them to rest. Sarah sat down heavily, her knees weak from the encounter. Leary, however, watched Cale closely. "You've done this before," she said quietly. Cale didn't look at her. "Too many times," he replied. There was something in his voice, tiredness, and something darker. Leary's curiosity burned hotter. "You said you failed before." She said, "What happened?" For a moment, Cale didn't answer. The wind rustled the leaves above, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. Finally, he spoke. "Another time," he said. "Another place." His eyes were distant now, looking at something only he could. See, I was too late, he added, almost to himself. Sierra didn't ask anything, but Leary could feel the weight of the words. They set off again, before the sun dropped too low. As the light began to fade, Cale led them to a small overhang of rock that formed a natural shelter. It was hidden from view, with enough space for a fire. Cale set down his pack and began preparing camp. The girls gathered small sticks and dried grass for the fire. For a while, they worked in silence, each lost in their thoughts. When the fire was lit, its glow softened the sharp lines of Cale's face. Sarah sat close to the warmth, staring into the flames. Leary finally asked the question she had been holding back since the market. Why us? She said. You could have walked past, like everyone else. Cale looked at her across the fire. Because I was tired of walking past, he said simply. The words hung in the air like a promise. Far off in the night, a faint howl rose again. But this time Cale didn't reach for his weapon. He just kept looking into the fire, as if he knew exactly what was coming next. And in that silence, both girls began to realize this journey was far from over, and the man leading them had his own reasons for walking this road. The night in the rocky shelter passed with uneasy quiet. The fire burned low, casting long shadows on the stone walls. Cale stayed awake the longest, his back against the rock, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the flames. Sarah slept curled under her blanket, her breathing soft and uneven. Leary, though lying still, was wide awake. She could hear Cale's steady breaths, but she knew he wasn't resting. When dawn came, Cale was already moving. He packed his gear with silent efficiency, then nudged the girls awake. We move early, he said. Someone's following us. Leary's head snapped up. You're sure? Cale nodded. I found tracks before we stopped last night. Sierra's voice trembled. Bandits? Not the same ones, Cale said. These know how to track. They left the shelter and climbed into the hills, moving quickly. Cale took routes that kept them out of sight from the main paths. Every so often, he paused to scan the ground, reading signs. The girls couldn't see broken twigs, faint impressions in the dirt. The girls followed close, their steps quiet but hurried. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a deep canyon, below a thin river wound through jagged rocks. The only way across was a narrow stone arch, natural but dangerous. Cale stopped and studied it for a moment. We cross here, he said, and then we make them lose the trail. The wind was strong at the top of the arch, pulling at their clothes. Sierra clung to Cale's coat as he guided her across. Leary followed close behind, refusing to look down at the rushing water below. When they reached the other side, Cale turned and studied the canyon again. If they're close, this will slow them, he murmured. They pushed on until they found a small patch of forest beyond the canyon. Here, Cale stopped and crouched, pulling a small knife from his belt. He began cutting low branches and weaving them through bushes, creating false trails. The girls watched, confused. You're hiding our path? Leary asked. Cale gave a short nod, and giving them the wrong one. Once the traps were set, they moved deeper into the trees until they reached a moss-covered clearing. Cale motioned for them to rest. The girls sat, their legs aching from the climb. For a moment, the forest was silent, except for the distant sound of birds. Then Sierra asked the question that had been haunting her since they left the market. What happens when you leave us? Cale didn't answer right away. He pulled a small piece of cloth from his coat and wiped the dust from his rifle. Finally he said, I don't leave you. Sierra's eyes widened. You mean, you'll keep us? Cale's gaze lifted too. Hers, I mean, until you can walk into a place without fear, he said. Until no one sees you as something to be owned. Leary's voice was sharper. And then what? We just go our own way. Cale's eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. That will be your choice, he said, before either girl could reply. Cale's head turned sharply toward the west. His eyes narrowed. From somewhere beyond the trees came the faint sound of breaking branches. Slow, deliberate steps. Cale stood, motioning for the girls to get behind him. The sound grew closer, until a tall figure emerged from the shadows. He was not a bandit. He wore a long coat like Kale's, but darker, with an insignia on the shoulder, a jagged emblem the girls didn't recognize. His face was lean, his eyes cold. "Well," the man said, his voice low and measured, "I didn't believe the rumors, but here you are." Kale didn't lower his weapon. "You're far from your territory," Kale said. The man's gaze flicked to the girls, lingering too long. "You know why I'm here," he said. "They're worth a fortune." Leary stepped forward instinctively, but Kale's arm stopped her. "They're not for sale," Kale said. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You always were stubborn," he said. "Last time, it cost you everything." Kale's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. The man took a step closer, his hand resting near his sidearm. "You can't win this time, Kale," he said. "Hand them over, and maybe you walk away." The silence that followed felt heavy. Sierra could hear her own heartbeat. Kale finally spoke, his voice calm, but carrying something sharp beneath it. "You know me," he said. "So you know I don't walk away." The other man's eyes narrowed. The tension stretched until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the man stepped back into the shadows, disappearing into the trees. But his voice carried back to them. "We'll meet again, Kale. And next time, I'll take them." Kale stayed still for a long moment after he was gone. Only when the sound of footsteps faded completely did he lower his weapon. He looked at the girls. "We move now," he said. "And we don't stop until night." As they set off again, Leary's mind churned with questions. Who was that man? What had Kale lost before? And why did she have this sinking feeling that their journey had just become much more dangerous? The forest grew darker as the sun sank behind the hills. Long shadows stretched between the trees, and the air turned cold. Kale moved quickly, his eyes scanning the undergrowth for movement. Sierra and Leary followed close, their breathing uneven. Neither of them had spoken since the man in the dark coat appeared. Finally, Sierra broke the silence, her voice trembling. "That man, he knew." "You?" Kale didn't slow down. "Yeah," he said. "We've crossed paths before." Leary pressed. "What did he mean? Last time it cost you everything." Kale's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any answer. They reached a rocky slope and climbed upward. At the top, Kale stopped to check the horizon. The sky was streaked with orange and deep red, far in the distance. Faint smoke rose into the air. Kale pointed. "We avoid that." "Why?" Sierra asked. "That's not cooking smoke," Kale replied. "That's a signal." They descended into a narrow ravine, the walls high and damp. The sound of dripping water echoed around them. It felt like the place swallowed their footsteps. Kale slowed his pace now, listening carefully. When they reached the far end, he suddenly held up a hand. The girls froze. From above, faint voices drifted down, speaking in low, urgent tones. Kale's eyes moved to the slope. "They're close," he whispered. "Too close." He led them into a shallow cave hidden by thick ferns. Inside, it was dark and cramped. They crouched low, their backs against the cold stone. Kale kept his rifle ready, his gaze fixed on the narrow opening. The voices above grew louder, then faded again. Leary leaned close, whispering, "You think they're hunting us?" Kale's voice was grim. "I know they are." Minutes passed like hours. Finally, Kale motioned for them to move. They slipped out of the cave and into the deep forest beyond the ravine. The ground here was soft with layers of fallen leaves. Kale used the cover to mask their tracks, stepping only on roots and stones when possible. When night fully fell, they stopped by a small stream. Kale didn't light a fire this time. "We can't risk smoke," he said. Instead, they ate cold rations in silence. Sierra's hands trembled as she tore the bread into small pieces. She looked up at Kale, her eyes wide. "Why do they want us so badly?" Kale's answer was blunt. "You're valuable." Leary frowned. Valuable for what? Cale hesitated, then said, different buyers want different things. None of them. Good. Sierra lowered her gaze, her shoulders curling inward. Leary's voice was sharper. And, what about you, Cale? What do you want? Cale met her stare without flinching. For you to be able to choose, he said. For no one to own you. Leary didn't look away, but she said nothing more. The night deepened, and the forest sounds grew louder. An owl hooted in the distance, and the rustle of small animals moved through the leaves. But under it all, Cale heard something else, a steady, deliberate rhythm. Footsteps. He was on his feet instantly, motioning for the girls to stay low. From the darkness ahead, a flicker of movement appeared, then another. 2 figures emerged from between the trees, both armed, both wearing the same insignia as the man from before. Cale raised his weapon. Not a step closer, he said. The men stopped, one raising a hand in mock peace. We're not here to fight, he said. Our boss just wants to talk. Not interested, Cale replied. The second man smirked. You don't get to say no. The tension snapped in an instant. The first man lunged forward, but Cale's shot rang out, dropping him before he could close the distance. The second dove for cover, firing wildly. Cale pulled the girls down behind a fallen log. Stay here, he ordered, before they could protest. He was gone, moving through the shadows like a ghost. The fight was short. A single muffled shot cut through the night, and then there was silence. Cale returned a moment later, his face unreadable. They won't follow us tonight, he said. Sierra looked at him with wide eyes. You killed them. Cale didn't answer directly. I kept us alive, he said simply. They moved again, deeper into the forest, until Cale finally found a hollow under a massive tree, hidden by roots and vines. This will do, he said. The girls curled up together while Cale sat outside the entrance, watching the darkness. Leary didn't sleep immediately. She kept her eyes on Cale's silhouette, his head turning slowly as he scanned the trees. She didn't know if he would survive what was coming, but for the first time, she understood one thing clearly. He would never hand them over, no matter the cost. The forest was still when Cale opened his eyes. A thin mist drifted between the trees, curling like smoke. The first light of dawn touched the leaves in pale gold. Cale had not slept. His rifle rested across his knees, and his ears caught every sound: the drip of dew, the distant call of a bird, the faint crunch of leaves under heavy boots. He turned his head slightly. Leary and Sierra were still huddled together under the massive tree's roots, breathing slow and deep. They looked peaceful, but Cale knew that peace would not last. The man in the dark coat would be coming. Men like that didn't give up, and Cale had run from him once before. Memories stirred uninvited. Another night, another pair of frightened faces, a promise he couldn't keep. Gunfire, screams, silence. Cale had carried that weight for years. Now, looking at the 2 alien girls he had pulled from the market, he swore he would not let it happen again. The sound of snapping twigs brought him back. He rose to his feet and moved toward the noise. From the shadows, the man appeared. Same long coat, same cold eyes. Behind him came from more, armed and silent. They fanned out in a slow half-circle, cutting off any path of escape. Cale, the man said, his voice calm. You should have taken my offer. Cale stepped forward, keeping himself between the girls and the threat. There was no offer, he said, only chains. The man's lips curved into a thin smile. You always did like pretending you're the hero. He nodded to his men. Take them. The forest exploded into movement. 2 of the men charged, but Cale dropped one with a single shot before spinning to strike the other with the rifles. Stock. Leary grabbed Sierra's hand and pulled her deeper under the roots. Bullets tore into the bark above them, splinters raining down. Cale moved like he had done this 100 times, using the trees as cover, firing only when he had a clear shot. 2 more went down, leaving only the man in the coat. He stepped forward. Slowly, weapon in hand. "You can save everyone," he said. "You couldn't before, and you won't now." Cale's voice was cold. "This time, I only need to save two." They moved at the same time. The crack of gunfire echoed through the forest, birds exploding into the air. The man staggered, clutching his side. Cale didn't give him a second chance. Another shot sent him sprawling into the dirt. Silence fell, broken only by the distant call of a crow. Cale stood still for a long moment, breathing hard, scanning for any more movement. When none came, he lowered his weapon. Leary crawled out from the roots, her eyes wide. Sarah followed, trembling. You beat them," Sarah whispered. Cale shook his head. "They'll send others," he said. "But it'll take them time." Leary stepped closer, her voice steady now. "You didn't run." Cale met her gaze. "I ran once," he said quietly, "and 2 people paid the price. I don't run anymore, for the first time." The girls understood that Cale's protection was not just kindness, it was redemption. Whatever ghosts he carried, this journey was his way of silencing them. He looked at them both. "You have a choice now," he said. "We can head to the next city, find a ship, get you far from here. Or you can stay with me." Sarah glanced at Leary. Her voice was small, but certain. "I don't want to be owned again." Leary nodded. "Then we stay with the man who made sure we wouldn't be." Cale didn't smile, but there was something softer in his eyes. "Then we move," he said. The 3 of them gathered their few belongings. The sun was rising higher now, painting the forest in light. They walked together along the narrow path, their shadows stretching long behind them. The market where they had met felt like a lifetime ago. The jeers and laughter of the crowd were distant echoes now. No one laughed anymore, not after seeing what one human could do. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the girls were no longer just the last of their kind. They were survivors, and Cale was the man who had made sure of it.